This is going to be my reaction video to the Lions' 25-7 loss to the Jaguars in Week 2 of the preseason. A game didn't look like the stadium was full, maybe 45, 50,000, something like that. It seemed pretty clear to me that the joint practices earlier in the week must have been quite productive for the Lions and the Jaguars, for that matter. In terms of starters, or even guys trying to start, there wasn't too many of those guys on the field. I felt like the Lions went further down in their depth chart today. I can't prove that. Some of it is speculative. But some of the matchups, an imbalance of the offensive line for the Lions going against the D-line for the Jags, it seemed pretty heavily weighted towards the Jags. These are two talented teams, both of which have aspirations on contending in their divisions, as they should, and making the playoffs. I thought Teddy Bridgewater was almost put in a situation that would be difficult to succeed. The offense was very inconsistent early on. Starting with the first play, I mean, it's a play-action boot concept under center on the first play of the game, and the defensive end, number 45, veers off to quarterback, veers off to Teddy Bridgewater. It kind of told you, what the day was going to be like. The offense was extremely inconsistent under him. Don't think that necessarily says anything about how Teddy Bridgewater played. And then things got even worse when Nate Sudfeld came in initially. He threw an interception, I think, on the Lions' 7th possession. And then the Lions, as they took over with 1 minute and a half, threw interceptions. Difficult to watch, in a preseason game. He also nearly had a forced fumble on what was eventually ruled a forward pass. He did lead a touchdown drive. I thought, as I mentioned earlier, the Jags D-line was able to get pressure on especially Bridgewater early and often, and at the same time hold down the run game. Lions run game, really wasn't able to generate anything. I'm not sure who the Lions had playing up front, I'll be honest with you. I didn't track that necessarily, but it's clearly not their starters, and in some cases appeared to be guys who were just overmatched by the Jaguars guys they were going up against. Offensively, the Jags were able to generate some big plays in the pass game in the first half. I think C.J. Beathard was like 12 of 20, had a number of throws to open wide receivers. He did throw an interception up top when Tracy Walker III at free safety was able to get the pass deflected, and really he deflected it to a teammate. He dropped it, was unable to catch it. But Beathard was willing to challenge the Lions DBs up the sidelines, outside the numbers. Tank Bigsby, the rookie running back, was very impressive. 13 carries, 70 yards. I think he had another 10 or 12 or 13-yard run called back for a penalty. And simultaneously, like I mentioned earlier, kind of talked about the Lions' offense was hamstrung by just an inability to deal with the D-line and block them on any run concept. Craig Reynolds, I guess, vying for the third-string running back, 8 carries, 13 yards in the first half. Meanwhile, Bridgewater was 5 for 11, and most of those completions were shorter and late in the progression. As far as, some bright spots, I mean, John Kaminsky had a possession that I'll talk about in a little while that I thought was pretty amazing. He made 3 plays on that possession. I think it was the Jags' 5th or 6th possession. Different guys flashed that are young defensive players. Josh Pascal. I thought James Houston, the 4th, played really well. Julian Okwara, I thought, had a couple QB pressures. Jack Campbell, I think, had 6 tackles in the first half. I think he had a special teams tackle. I don't know if he was credited with it, but he's down there on punt team in the third quarter. Sudfeld did lead that touchdown drive in the third quarter, I think culminating with the 4th down touchdown to Coda. I'm going to let some of the stats run here. I don't know if this font or this text will be too small, so if it is, please let me know in the comment section, and for further reaction videos, I'll make sure I enlarge some of that. But overall, if you look at the team stats, and that is what you see right there, I mean, you're talking about 131 yards of total offense and 9 first downs for the Lions. Clearly, didn't put out there a good product in terms of the players that were on the field to compete with who the Jags, utilized today. I don't know if the coaches coordinated, the coaches between the two teams and said, hey, we're gonna sit out these types of players on our depth chart and try to create a balanced situation, but it clearly was not. Yards per play, 2.6 for the Lions and 5.7 for the Jags. Jags had 22 first downs, really got into them. 145 rushing yards, 250 passing, complete one-sided game. Kind of expect that when you look at who was not on the field for the Lions. Bigsby and then another backup running back to Ernest Johnson. They had some really strong runs. 19, I think those two combined, 19 carries for 104, 105 on the ground. As far as the game flow, it was pretty obvious early that Bridgewater was under siege on pass plays, and they couldn't get any vertical or horizontal push on run concepts. Like I said, the first play of the game, the defensive end for the Jags on the play-action boot veers right off. Now, Bridgewater escaped it. He escaped it and threw incomplete. He also had a play on third down, same possession, where he escaped 2 sacks. I think he actually switched the ball from his right hand to his left hand and then back. I only saw the play once. I was watching it on NFL Network, so I didn't get a whole lot of replays, to be honest with you. Lions' second possession, run game was stacked up twice, and then Bridgewater on a third down pass, threw it a little bit behind Brock Wright, who was open versus a linebacker and man, kind of indicative of the way the game was going to go, in that when you did have an opportunity to get a third down, ball was thrown a little bit behind the tight end, and he was unable to come up with it. I think he was able to get his left hand on it. Jags' second possession, Beathard goes up top, a big 48-yard completion to Tim Jones versus Stephen Gilmore, who then had an interception to end that possession about halfway through the third quarter. I'm sorry, had an interception on the ensuing possession halfway through the second quarter. Ended up being a 3-0 Jags lead. Stephen Gilmore did a nice job on a 3rd and 9 there against Tim Jones again to tip the pass away. Great call, great play, and I thought the guys that were doing the announcing, explained it well. Lions' third possession, Chase Cota, who played well in the Week 1 preseason game against the Giants, had what looked like a ridiculous catch along the right sideline on a 3rd and 9. I thought it was a long throw from the other hash by Bridgewater. It certainly wasn't, a laser or a rocket by Bridgewater, but he got it out there in a spot where Chase Cota could catch it. Maybe the ball, if it's another 6 inches further in towards the field, then Cota can corral it and get that second foot down. It was initially ruled a catch, I think, and then they ruled it incomplete. Lions had to punt. The ensuing possession, like I said, the Jags, get an interception. The Jags throw an interception. Beathard throws it up top. Tracy Walker at free safety is able to play over the top of it and tip it or drop it. And Stephen Gilmore gets the interception. I didn't realize he was Stephen Gilmore's brother. And then to open the second quarter, or bridging the end of the first quarter and second quarter, was the Kaminsky possession in terms of he was able to make all the plays on that possession. It was a 3-play drive, 4 counting the punt. But on the first down run, Bigsby, who's a hell of an athlete, very impressive. I don't know if you're impressed by him, but I was. I mean, even in college, but today he looked great. Bigsby tried to bounce it outside of Kaminsky, who was playing left D end, and Kaminsky tracked him. I don't know that Kaminsky got credit for the tackle because Bigsby put his foot in the ground and kind of tried to cut it back up some out inside of Kaminsky. And I think someone else was there. I don't know who it was, made a tackle. So it's a 2-yard gain, turns it to a 2nd and 8. On a 2nd and 8, it's another run concept to Kaminsky's side, and he stacks up the whole damn thing. The NFL Network guys did show the end zone angle of that, or show actually a zoomed-in view of that, and how Kaminsky got his arm out and framed him up, set the edge. Barnes was there as inside linebacker number 55, so it was a 1-yard gain. Then on the 3rd and 7, I think Kaminsky it's a completion to James Hasty, and Barnes is in coverage, turns into a 4th and 3, and the Jags go for it. This is the first play of the second quarter. Kaminsky gets his hand up and knocks the pass down. It was like he made 3 plays, or was heavily involved in 3 plays in a 4-play stretch for me, and I think he did play a couple of possessions after that. I don't know because I don't have access to snap counts and stuff, but for me, I remember thinking, what's he on the field for now? For real, me personally, as somebody who really likes the guy, I would want him off the field. Lions ensuing possession, ton of pressure on the quarterback. Again, they have to punt. Still second quarter, Jags 3-0. You get a sack. You get heavy pressure on this possession, and great, I thought, effort by a lot of young guys on the D-line for the Lions. This is Jags' 6th possession. Really was a showcase for their D-line depth, but unfortunately, the Jags are still able to salvage a field goal out of it, and but Josh Pascal, James Houston at 4th, Julian Okwara, he had a sack that he split with, it wasn't Pascal, I think he split it with Jones, the D-tackle 94. Pascal, I thought, had a sack the play before, but on a 2nd down sack, the one by Okwara, there was illegal contact downfield by someone for the Lions, I think a DB, pretty much gave the Jags a 1st down. A couple plays later, they're crossing midfield, 3 consecutive 10-yard passes by Beathard, 2 of which are against man-to-man. The big one was the 3rd and 2, is a snag wheel concept. The running back is open on the wheel coming out of the backfield, and Beathard hits the snag to the X. I don't know the player's name or number, but ends up being a 10-yard gain. That one was huge. And then Kaminsky gets a sack on a great edge rush by James Houston that kind of forced the quarterback back. He forced the tackle into the quarterback's lap, I should say, and then Kaminsky was up underneath. But Jags are able to get a field goal, go up 6-0. Nate Sudfeld throws an interception on the Lions' 7th possession, like I said, with about a minute left in the half, so the Jags take over on the 19, and then they get that 3rd and 6 touchdown to Parker Washington. If you're a Lions fan, you probably watch a lot of Big Ten football, I would guess. And Parker Washington, of course, from Penn State, had a great career there. He beats man-to-man coverage on Starlin Thomas. He was the inside receiver in the bunch running out into the flats. So tough cover for Starlin Thomas, in that it was man. I thought they played a lot of man today. One of the announcers talked about this is what the Lions want to do. They want to play a lot of man, but maybe there's a time, depending on who you have on the field, to shy away from that, to avoid that. 3rd quarter, I was surprised not only that Jack Campbell was still on the field. The Jags have replaced their quarterback. They brought in Nathan Rourke, the guy who played in the CFL, I think, last year or last 2 years. And not only was I surprised Jack Campbell was still on the field in the 3rd quarter, I was surprised he was on punt team. But Lions on their 9th possession are able to close to 12-7, kind of make the game a little bit more interesting. I don't know about you. I was sitting there watching the game, and I was interested, but I wasn't incredibly interested just because of the game flow and stuff like that. But it's a 4th and goal from the 1. Dan Campbell decides to go for it, and this time Sudfeld hits Coda for a touchdown. But then the Jags go right back downfield behind Nathan O'Rourke, 18-7, cap it with a 1-yard touchdown by Dearness Johnson. I think Johnson scored again later on in the second half when James Houston IV kind of wrong-armed it. Wrong arm means like he takes on the tight end's kick-out block on the inside to make it bounce, and when it bounced, there was nobody really flowing outside, so I don't know if that was James Houston IV's mistake or someone else's mistake for not fitting or flowing over the top. But generally, on those concepts, you kind of want to wrong arm it, make the running back spill outside, let someone flow over the top. But it didn't work in this case. I didn't think the Lions really put a group out there today to really win the game. That wasn't their focus. It seemed like they probably got great work this week from all reports that I read with the Jags and the joint practices, and got all the answers they needed about players and situations or whatever. A little surprised with how much Kaminsky played. Wasn't surprised that some of the young defensive players looked so good, particularly Josh Pascal. I think he's an underrated guy that very few people would look at and say he's going to be a guy who's going to play a lot and have a big impact. I find him to be very good against the run, the plays that I've seen. I know that he didn't play, every game last year, but I think this is a guy who's going to have an impact. And I remember when he went into the 2022 NFL draft, I thought he was a guy that teams will be looking at a little earlier than he got drafted. But in any case, kind of a difficult game to watch the entire game of, and I'll be honest with you. I'll post up the play-by-play for this. I doubt if anyone's interested, in the description. You'll be welcome to download it if you wish to. I'll try to do that for every Lions game I do a reaction video for. But I'll be honest with you, I stopped charting plays in the 4th quarter. I did, because there was 2 possessions in a row where the announcers were talking to people. I think at one point they were talking to the president of the Lions, and they weren't showing some of the plays. So I was like, why am I tracking this? Why am I documenting all this? So, but I want to share it with each game so people believe me when I say that I actually do that, and I have the data for myself to put into the database when I do acquire the film to line up with the documentation. I thought it was a difficult game to sit through and watch the entire four quarters, and probably the last 4 minutes of which I found myself thinking I hope nobody scores, and I can just go ahead and make some of these pictures like here you see here for the reaction, and the scoreboard doesn't change, because I had 25-7 on the scoreboard for a while, and I was like, I hope nobody kicks a field goal to make it 28-7, and I got to go back and change all these pictures. In terms of production, offensively, it's difficult to really talk about anyone. I am interested in Chase Cota, though. I know he only had 2 catches, but last week played well. I think he had 4 catches last week. James Mitchell did have 2 catches on 2 targets. They really couldn't get anything going in the run game at all. Brock Wright had 1 target and didn't catch anything. I think Jason Kabinda maybe had a drop out in the flats, or maybe that wasn't him. It was someone else on a play action pass out into the flats. Campbell finished with 7 tackles. James Houston, look, he's one of my favorite players. I'll just say that up front. So I'm probably a little biased, but 6 tackles, 4 TFLs, a sack, another quarterback hit, and I thought there was a second sack that he could have had. Well, the one I talked about, he beat the right tackle, or he basically bull rushed the right tackle. I'm glad to see Houston develop in a bull rush because his speed rush is fantastic, and his pad level is incredibly low for the amount of speed that he's able to generate and power. So the bull rush, I think, will be great. I don't know about you, but seeing Tracy Walker out there at free safety, just to hopefully have him available with all of the DB talent they have, is going to give the Lions great options for nickel and dime situations. When you talk about Kirby Joseph, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Brian Branch, there's a ton of depth there. Seemed like the Lions went into this one just trying to get all their main players out healthy. Teddy Bridgewater didn't get to give a great accounting of himself, I think, because of the imbalance of who was thrown out there from a Lions perspective versus the guys the Jags use on defense. I didn't see a ton of starters for the Jags on defense either. But it just seemed like their interior D tackles were able to overwhelm the O-line for the Lions on run concepts and then on some pass plays. There was no time for Teddy Bridgewater to do anything. I was really impressed with how he was able to get out of the pocket and get away from some sacks, especially the first play of the game. I thought he was, the guy had him dead to rights. But in any case, you guys let me know what you think of the video if you watched this far. Again, I contend that it was a game where the Lions just wanted, and the Jags wanted to get out of it healthy after finishing the joint practices. I would look for probably the same thing in the third preseason game, but who knows? Different teams take different approaches. I know the Jags played a lot of their first-team offense in their Week 1 preseason game, and teams like the Texans, I think tonight or this afternoon, have already started by playing a lot of their starters. So appreciate you guys' time. If you checked out the video, let me know what you think of it. Again, I'll put a link to download the game data. It's tracked in live time, so I'm tracking that and watching the plays. I'm only one person, so there's times where the run concept is missed or the gain is missed. But if the ball's on the 32 and the next play's on the 37, well, we know it was a 5-yard gain. But in any case, appreciate you guys' time. If you checked out the video and you think other Lions fans might enjoy a reaction video for this preseason game, which seemed to be a pretty ho-hum loss, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it somewhere on social media to help this content get more reach.